Welcome to Analysis in Chains with Nathan and Neal. Happy Monday, everybody. 30th of October, getting ready for Halloween. How are you doing today, Neal?
All is going well. I've been obsessed with Stranger Things, the new series on Netflix. It's amazing. It's like my cocaine. I get to look forward to these type of shows, and yeah, it's amazing. So yeah, this is my way of celebrating Halloween.
Haven't seen season 2 yet, but season 1 was amazing.
Yeah.
Yep, it's something to binge watch maybe if I get a few minutes. How was your weekend?
It was good. I think I spent way too much time reading about the next hard fork that's coming along, and it really is exciting. What's going on now in crypto? I think could really define things in the future. So yeah, we'll talk more about that later on.
Yeah, no, that's exciting. On Friday, I actually met up with one of our listeners.
Awesome.
With Sebastian. Yeah. Sebastian wrote in, and he's one of our listeners, listens to our show regularly, and he was like, "Oh, I see, we're both in the same town. We should get together." And I was like, "Well, there's a party going on." We went to a magazine release party for the 100th magazine, which is a startup magazine featuring different startups from around the ecosystem and what they're working on. And so it was fun. We got together, we chatted, and he offered to do us some new theme music. I guess he's got a media production company. So look forward to having some new Nathan and Neal Analysis in Chains theme music made by Sebastian coming soon.
Awesome.
Keep you in the loop.
Awesome. I was really jealous based on those drunk text messages you were sending me. I was like, damn, I wish I was at that party. It looked like fun.
It was pretty good. I met a few other people that may end up coming on the show at some point. I met the blockchain guy from EY.
Oh, fantastic.
And invited him to come on the show, and invited the blockchain expert from the Investment Bank of Berlin. So he may end up coming on the show as well. So it was a good networking event all around.
Fantastic.
Anyway, have you been taking a look at the news today, Neal? I sent you something this morning. Did you have a chance to read it about Catalonia?
Oh, Catalunya. I've been following the whole story in regards to Catalonia for the last few weeks. And it doesn't come as much of a surprise to have cryptocurrencies mentioned. And I think your article was mentioning how Vitalik was potentially involved in discussion to develop their own cryptocurrency when they do break away from Spain. I think he has since denied any involvement. But it does bring up the whole issue of whenever countries do seek independence, that cryptocurrency is becoming, I guess, a leveraging tool, because if you ever break away from a country, you risk of not having any currency and cannot do anything. You cannot give people anything. So it really does raise the question of, could cryptocurrencies become a medium of leverage for countries when they are trying to negotiate their independence in the future?
What was interesting to me, I mean, I've sort of been following a little bit what's going on. I haven't been too deeply engrossed in the story, but the fact that they would turn to cryptocurrency when as a way of breaking away from the euro, as a way of breaking out of the eurozone, as a way of establishing their independence, I found very interesting. You're right that the article I read, and we can include it in the show notes, did claim that Vitalik was advising them. And I read this story on Reddit, and he went right on Reddit and said, "No, this is fake news. I totally didn't do this." Don't know where they got this idea from. So, but it is interesting, because I started thinking, why would they go for a cryptocurrency? What's the benefit, right? I mean, if they're trying to fast track a cryptocurrency in order to say, well, now we've got our own currency and we totally don't need the euro or Spain or anyone else's support, why? Crypto is complex to use for the average person, and they've got a lot of different type of people there. Can you imagine, old grandmas going and, buying their scratch and win lottery tickets at the local convenience store using a crypto key? What would happen if they lost their crypto key? It seems that there's a lot of development there that they might not be ready for, and maybe crypto isn't quite at that place yet.
Yeah, I agree. If this was a story 10 years in the future, I would see it as something that could really happen. But I think that cryptocurrencies and blockchains are still in their infant stage of development, and it's too early to do something like this, especially for such a huge region like Catalunya that is already financially very, very wealthy. And it would be so risky to be involved in something that could be so volatile. When we look at Bitcoin and see how much it's been fluctuating over the last few months, and the same with many other cryptocurrencies, it's a very risky undertaking. But I'm sure in the future, the more people learn about cryptocurrencies, their behaviors, their characteristics, then it becomes much easier to roll out a cryptocurrency that represents a geographical region. So I'm sure, I wouldn't be surprised if this did become more of a thing in the future, but I feel that it's probably just too early to be using cryptocurrencies for something like Catalunya.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the same page with you. I agree. It's just, I was trying to think through, like, why would they do it? What are the advantages? And I did think of a few. I don't think it's enough to say that this would work. I totally think it won't work. Not at all. But I could think of a few. And one of them is, I know enough that about the situation to know that they're not being supported by Europe. They're not being Catalonia is not being supported by the UK. And so, finding someone to actually print a currency for them might be difficult unless they have their own mint there. And switching over from printing euros, even if they had a local mint, might be rather difficult and expensive because you need anti-counterfeiting tools in there, and that's something that comes built into crypto. So I could see why, if they wanted a really fast adoption of a new currency, that it might make sense to say, well, this is the way that we're going to do it. We can avoid setting up our own new currency with the SWIFT system. We can bypass, international transfer issues with SEPA and all of these international bank transfer systems. So for speed of getting it online and integrated with the rest of the world, I think it makes some sense. But for what the average person uses currency for, it might be a little bit early, missing the features. Like, actually being able to spend and not losing your life savings because you misplace a USB key.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with your assessment there. It has the main characteristics to be a de facto currency of a region, but it's stuff like, block time. Is it quick enough? Fees, transaction fees, those type of things. I think once people find a way around them, and in terms of reducing them, I think that's like the biggest hurdle, because people will be like, okay, I have this cryptocurrency, and if I want to buy coffee, it's 25% more because of transaction fees. So it's like all of these things, I think once they're worked out over time, then your grandmas can buy their scratch lottery tickets or whatever, then it becomes more feasible. So I think as a solution, it definitely is an option, but yeah, as we're saying, it just has more maturity to do before it can really be adaptable for a regional currency.
Well, let's ask the listeners, what do you guys think? What do you think? Do you think that this makes sense? That if you wanted to make a breakaway country, or if you were part of a group that was splitting off from your country, that you could make it fly with crypto? Let us know by joining our Slack, and we can chat about that all day long. visit our website at www.analysisinchains.com. Ask for a Slack invite. We've got a bunch of people on there. We're chatting about different crypto issues, about future stories to cover in the podcast, and you can join us there. So Neal, about that Bitcoin price.
Yeah, it's crazy. I believe it hit 6,300 today, and I spend a lot of time now listening to podcasts, going on YouTube videos, trying to get other people's opinion about Bitcoin, like what's going on, especially when we have this Segwit2x hard fork coming along. And obviously there's two camps. One is, Bitcoin's going to the moon, and these people are usually against Segwit2x. And then there are people like me who are becoming increasingly nervous in regards to Bitcoin, because this hard fork could be very, very complicated. And for some reason, people don't see that coming, and they're enthusiastic about the potential of getting free money. But to me, I see a lot of risks coming for Bitcoin, especially when 83% of the mining pool for Bitcoin as it stands is in favor of Segwit2x. And then it's not completely and clearly defined which version of Bitcoin gets to be BTC. So this is it's definitely going to be a marketing issue, and there's so many unknowns. I can't understand why people are buying so much Bitcoin at the moment.
I find it really interesting, this whole idea of getting free money, because this got brought up in our Slack as well. Someone asked us if it makes sense to buy Bitcoin now right before the fork. We just had the Bitcoin Gold fork, and now we expected that Bitcoin would dip in price a little bit, and I think it did for 10 minutes, and then it's back up to a new record. And then it's well, should I get this for the potential returns? Now, my response and my thoughts on the matter are, first of all, we can't give financial advice. Number one, don't expect it. But because we're not financial advisors, we're just a couple of guys looking at this. However, the idea of free money, it keeps coming up over and over again when we're at these forks. And I'm starting to see a bit of a diminishing returns, right? Because if you look at Bitcoin Cash, that debuted at about 10% of the value of Bitcoin. It was about $400 at the time when Bitcoin was about 4,000. And then Bitcoin Gold debuted at about 128 when Bitcoin was at 5,000. So 2 to 3% of the value. What's the Bitcoin 2X going to debut at, the Bitcoin hard fork? If it's, again, at 1% or 2% of the value, is it really worth getting that free money when Bitcoin itself changes 10% overnight? What's the, is it really that big of an incentive for people to sign up and get this free money at the risk of catching the downspin where Bitcoin's going to end up losing, 20% of its value?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point that you just made. I never made that connection before in regards to the value of the hard fork after it happens. And the other thing is, which Bitcoin do people want to buy? If people are into the frenzy of Bitcoin and they're hearing about it everywhere, when they go into Coinbase and sign up, what do they want to buy? Do they care about Segwit2x? Do they care about legacy, if we just call it legacy just for the time being? Do they care which one they get? And is it just about the brand? And that's the thing that I find funny, is that just say Segwit2x becomes BTC. It keeps that code name. That would mean that the one that the core developers are behind could end up just being valued at 2%, as just going back to your analysis. And does that make sense? Does that make sense that Segwit2x gets to be worth more than 6,000, whereas the core developer one only ends up being maybe valued at $200, or even vice versa? If the core one ends up retaining the BTC name and the Segwit2x becomes known as B2X and is only valued at $200 a coin, does that make sense? And this is where I struggle to really want to put my money in Bitcoin, because it just feels like a big marketing tool. No one's really buying the technology or buying the future. They're just buying the brand that's just going up and up and up in value. And when you look at other cryptocurrencies on coinmarketcap.com, you see that nearly all cryptos are devaluing in relation to Bitcoin price. So Ethereum is just getting less and less valued compared to Bitcoin. Same with many other ones. And so it makes me feel that this crypto boom we saw in the summer is actually slowly deflating, whereas Bitcoin on its own is just going through this crazy bubble, and because people are just so obsessed about the marketing and the hype around it, and they're not really concerned about the technology or what it's supposed to be in the future.
Could you remind me, Neal, because I'm embarrassed to admit I don't remember which side of the Bitcoin fork is which? Which one is the core developers and which one is like the miners?
So,
because I understand that there are like two main, entities here, right?
So a lot of this argument in relation to the recent forks is down to scalability. How can you make something work efficiently when more and more people want to use it? And in terms of Bitcoin Cash, they just felt, okay, let's just increase the block size, and that's it. Then we had Segwit. Segwit was about having these, you could say, these side chains that run in parallel that kind of like carry some of the load, but that means you get to retain the 1 megabyte block size. Whereas Segwit2x would like to have a bigger block size, I believe 2 megabytes. So the core developers are in the 1x camp, and that's the kind of terminology used at the moment in all of these Reddit forums. So the core developers are in 1x, and the miners are in the 2x. And so we'll see which one prevails, because it just seems to be a power struggle between the core developers who spent a lot of their free time trying to develop Bitcoin, and they see it as their baby. Whereas you have the miners who do a lot of the investment in maintaining the network, and obviously they feel that they should have some form of influence on the future of Bitcoin. So it's very much just a power struggle as to the future of the ideology of Bitcoin. And to be honest with you, you could just flip a coin to really determine which way it will go, because to me it's very, very unpredictable to determine which one will come out on top.
I find it interesting, especially because there's so much at stake, right? Bitcoin has an awful lot of value. And the people who are forking off to make Bitcoin Cash, to make Bitcoin Gold, and all of these other altcoins, which are essentially forks and not their own separate project, they're definitely related, is that they stand to gain from erosion of Bitcoin value, right? It's like you just noticed that right now Bitcoin seems to be to the moon and at the expense of most of the altcoins that are out there. And so I see this increasingly as a struggle for value as much as it's a struggle for ideology.
Yeah, I think.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think you make a good point. It's like it's trying to figure itself out, and I think what's going to be very interesting is that we have this Bitcoin value increasing. We have these analysts like Tom Lee stating it's going to be 25K in 5 years, and because it's become sort of a monster, people want to be part of it. They want to have some skin in the game. Okay, I have $1,000 in Bitcoin. And look, we'll see what happens. I looked at a video of Mark Cuban, who was given some advice on how to be rich, and he advised putting 10% of all of your savings into Bitcoin or Ethereum. So people hear this and they keep putting money into Bitcoin, but it makes me more anxious. The higher it goes, the quicker it goes up. It makes me think, okay, well, like, what are we working towards here? What are we valuing it against? What's the reference point to really determine this value? And people just look at volume. But what if all the people who are interested in putting money in Bitcoin have done it? They're like, okay, I've already done that. All the people interested in Bitcoin or who are good at computers, because not everyone, not your grandma isn't going to go online and buy Bitcoin. So once we hit that peak of everyone interested who want to put money in Bitcoin, what I feel could happen is that once it stabilizes and it stops growing, I can foresee a lot of that value going into the other cryptocurrencies, because a lot of those other cryptocurrencies have a lot of technological features that Bitcoin do not have. And I feel that they're very much being undervalued. And the thing about Bitcoin is that if you just say you make a fortune betting on Bitcoin, just say you put in $1,000 and it's gone up 100% and now it's worth $2,000. If you convert that to fiat, you're subject to capital gains tax in your country. So some people could think, you know what, I could lose 40% of this gain, or I could put it into another cryptocurrency that's now gaining value or has some potential. So what I foresee happening is that potentially Bitcoin will increase in value because of all the hype around it. But then there will be a plateau point that people realize, okay, maybe we've capped out. The volume is not increasing. And I foresee a big, I guess, distribution of that value into other cryptocurrencies.
You may very well be right. The counterpoint, the
go on.
I mean, I don't know if I'm not feeling half as confident as I used to when I make predictions, but just possibilities I like to raise is that institutional investors, I think, are just starting to look at Bitcoin. It's just starting right, like in the past couple of weeks and going forward, to gather the attention of people like Mark Cuban saying, put in 10% of your wealth into Bitcoin. Well, when he's saying that, what's important isn't the average person doing their own investments. What's more important is whether institutions who have larger amounts at stake, pension funds and index funds and JP Morgan and all of these guys, whether they feel confident investing in Bitcoin in more than just a couple of coins here and there. And would they feel as confident going after something like Omisgo or Neo or Monero or something even at its earlier stage? They might not, because they tend to be more risk averse. So Bitcoin may end up being the beneficiary of being the one that people have the most trust in just because they know the name, and be the first place where these institutional investors start to dump their money.
Well, I would see Bitcoin as the entry point, because generally if you want to buy a lot of these other cryptocurrencies, you need to own Bitcoin before you can transfer onto another coin, depending on the exchange you actually use. So I can see institutional investors actually helping raise other cryptocurrencies. I think institutional investors will help determine who are the winners and losers of what is out there already. Because whenever I go on forums or people ask me about advice in regards to what to invest in, it usually ends up being the same names. Invest in Monero, Dash, IOTA. A lot of the ones you see in the top 20 are the ones with a lot of potential. And so I think that a lot of institutional investors, when they come in, they will actually help create the divide between what will be the cryptocurrencies of the future and what will actually be left in the trash can. But in saying that, I wouldn't be surprised if they are to some extent riding this wave, because they're experts in riding the waves of asset classes. Okay, something is going one direction, let's just ride that wave. But they're also very, very quick at determining at what point they should get out. And if they're very, very good at that, they're going to be moving the value of their Bitcoin into other cryptocurrencies. And that's where my analysis and prediction comes from, is that once they smell danger in Bitcoin, they will start to redistribute that into other cryptocurrencies. And then when I go back to my interview with Bharat Rao with Leverage, he comes from finance. He has this experience, and he's trying to develop tools to help optimize analysis and execution of trade deals. And so that's why I'm less inclined to think institutional investors will get behind Bitcoin, because I'm sure that they see the risks. When I watch these videos, a lot of these guys are in finance and they do like crypto videos on the side for a bit of fun. And with their financial advice and like they're all saying, financial experience, they all say, okay, Bitcoin's going up, I don't know why, and it makes me anxious. And so this is what I keep hearing from all these guys who are from the financial background. So it's why I'm thinking maybe it could go a bit further. Maybe Bitcoin will grow a bit more, but the higher it goes up, the more anxious I'm going to feel, and the more confident I'll be feel in the likes of Ethereum and Monero, who will eventually see their prices go up once people lose faith in Bitcoin.
One last thing that you brought up as a factor in this in what ends up being chosen, the chosen one. I find it very interesting that we have the exchanges that are going to end up standing in the gap. Like whoever the exchanges choose is really going to be very important.
Yeah,
the kingmaker, yeah. Exactly. It's sort of like I just had a flashback to when I was learning about when the U.S. made the U.S. dollar the only way you could purchase oil. That was sort of their agreement with Britain for helping them rebuild after World War II. And it ended up making them the dominant player in geopolitics right up until present day. And in the same way, if the exchanges insist that, okay, well, Bitcoin is what we're going to carry. We're not even going to carry these forks, or we're going to carry the fork. We're not going to carry legacy Bitcoin. And if that's the way that you have to purchase into these ICOs and these altcoins, then there may be no getting rid of Bitcoin then, or there may be no getting rid of 2x or whichever one gets chosen.
Yeah,
and that's probably a voice that we need to keep in mind, and as a player, an important player in who comes out on top here.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why this is a game of marketing and a game of politics, and it's becoming less about technology, because having good relationships with the exchanges could really determine which one comes on top. And I believe that Coinbase is a supporter of Segwit2x from what I've been reading, but they have stated officially that when people sign up after the fork, Bitcoin BTC is going to represent the 1x, and B2X will be the Segwit2x Bitcoin. But it did state that if it turns out that there is a lot of support for B2X to be the official B2C, then they will actually change the definition of Bitcoin. And so, yeah, like this really does go to show how they are kingmakers. And it's going to be very interesting to hear in the next week or two, before the fork actually happens, will a lot of these exchanges actually explicitly state their positions? Because I'm trying to find some news on this. It's not very clear. And if I think back to the Bitcoin Gold hard fork, I was on B2X, and B2X stated their policy for the hard fork for Bitcoin Gold, and I still didn't get any BTG. I still have no Bitcoin Gold after that hard fork. So I think people really need to do research on their wallets and on their exchanges to figure out what are their positions on this, because I'm sure a lot of people want to get their free coins, and you have to best understand the exchanges, how they're going to go about it, because some people will want to cash in as soon as possible. So that's my advice to listeners, is do some research on your exchanges to understand what their position is going forward, so you don't get a shock, because I don't think people are really investigating enough about what's coming. They're just thinking free money and not realizing that actually this is a potential earthquake coming in the crypto sphere.
Absolutely. And speaking of free coins, if you want some free coins that are awesome and will be the best coins you could ever hold, you want some nutshells. Some Nathan and Neal Analysis in Chains nutshells. And you know how you get them? Well, the easiest way is to go to www.analysisinchains.com, sign up for our Slack, and I'll send you 20. All right? So have a great week, everybody. We'll talk to you guys on Friday. That's our show. Thanks for tuning in to Analysis in Chains with Nathan and Neal. Check us out at analysisinchains.com, on iTunes, Podbean, and wherever else you listen to podcasts. Until next time, keep hashing.